Okay, so you want to own a gas station. You find the right corner high traffic, good visibility, maybe a canopy with 8 pumps already humming. Cars rolling in, one after another, all day, all night. Every fill-up is a transaction. Every transaction hits your register. Your name on the pylon sign out by the highway. Money arriving while you sleep. That's the picture. And honestly, it's a good one. Gasoline will not make you rich. In December of 2021, a branded Murphy USA dealer in the Memphis market watched his wholesale rack price spike 11 cents per gallon overnight crude had moved. The supplier's price moved with it, and his street price could not follow without losing every customer to the station across the road. He pumped 90,000 gallons that month and lost money doing it. 90,000 gallons moved through his pumps. Net fuel income, negative. Some gas stations genuinely make money. Some quietly bleed their owners dry while the property appreciates and the debt compounds. And some destroy people who walked in convinced they were buying a cash machine and discovered, too late, they had bought a logistics operation with a convenience store attached. By the end of this, you'll understand which version most people actually buy and why the pump is a door, not the business itself. There are 3 distinct businesses that all wear the same sign. The first is the pure independent no-brand affiliation, buys fuel on the open spot market, owns the real estate outright, sets his own price. Rarest model in the country and the most exposed to crude volatility. The second is the branded dealer flies an ExxonMobil flag, or a Shell flag, or a BP flag, locked to that supplier's wholesale rack price under a multi-year contract, gets brand support and recognition, gives up pricing independence in exchange. The third is the convenience store-anchored operator, Wawa, Casey's, Sheetz, Buc-ee's, where fuel is deliberately priced as a traffic tool, and the real economics live inside the building. This script covers the branded convenience store model because it is the one most people picture when they imagine owning a station, and because it contains the most counterintuitive financial mechanics of any retail business in America. Here is the thing nobody says at the outset. One of these models is a fuel business with a snack rack bolted on. One is a retail business that runs fuel as a door to something far more profitable. Those 2 things have almost nothing in common on a balance sheet. The entry price starts at $800,000 for an existing operational mid-tier branded station in a secondary market, and that number assumes the tanks are clean, the equipment works, and the prior owner left nothing buried for you to find. In a primary market, on a high-traffic corner, you are starting at $1.5 million before you touch anything. New construction land, canopy, tanks, pump islands, the building itself runs $1.5 to $3 million depending on the state and the format size. Tank installation alone on a new build runs $120,000 to $160,000 for a standard 3-tank underground setup meeting current EPA specifications. That figure does not include the monitoring system, the secondary containment liner, or the state-required leak detection hardware. Add another $30,000 to $50,000 for full compliance. Branded stations carry an additional cost almost no buyer prices in at signing, the image program requirement. When you take on a Shell or BP brand, you inherit an obligation to meet their physical standards, signage, canopy, pump face, interior layout. On a refresh cycle the brand controls. That cycle runs somewhere between 8 and 12 years. The refresh itself costs $50,000 on the low end for a small footprint, and well over $150,000 for a larger format site. You do not choose when this happens. The brand's agreement tells you when. And then there is the thing the seller's P&L will never show you. Environmental contamination. Underground storage tanks have leaked at roughly 1 in 3 sites. Over the past 40 years, the EPA's own remediation database has tracked over 500,000 confirmed release sites since the program started. You commission a Phase 1 environmental assessment before you buy. Maybe you commission a Phase 2. The Phase 2 finds nothing. You sign. You close. 18 months later, during a routine tank test, A sensor trips. You call an environmental contractor. The number he gives you starts at 100,000 and does not come with a ceiling. The seller is gone. The bank lent you the money. The EPA has your name on the site file. Now the upside case, stated in full, knowing what the entry costs. Fuel gross profit on a well-run branded station doing 100,000 gallons a month runs between 3 and 8 cents per gallon after the supplier's wholesale price, but before credit card fees. Credit card fees on fuel transactions run between 3 and 4 cents per gallon at current interchange rates, which means, on a thin margin day, the credit card fee eats the entire fuel margin, and then some. The largest oil companies in the world engineered a system where the dealer selling their product pays a processing fee for accepting the payment method their own customers refuse to leave home without. Think about that for a moment. The dealer runs the location, takes the risk, pays the brand, then pays again to collect. A station doing 150,000 gallons a month sounds like a thriving operation. That is the number buyers brag about at broker meetings. At 5 cents net per gallon after fees, a realistic good margin day, that station generates $7,500 in monthly fuel gross profit on a $2 million acquisition. The fuel side alone does not service that debt, not even close. A convenience store attached to a fuel operation doing $1 million in monthly inside sales, realistic for a well-trafficked larger format station, runs gross margins of 28 to 32% on packaged goods. That's between $280,000 and $320,000 in gross profit before operating costs. A single fountain drink costs the operator roughly 18 cents to produce and sells for $1.49 to $1.79. Margin on that cup, above 70%. The fuel brought the customer in. The fountain drink is where the margin lives. Prepared food pushes that number further. A station running a proprietary food program, breakfast sandwiches, hot dogs, roller grill can hit margins of 55 to 65% on food items. Pantry Inc., which at its peak operated over 1,500 convenience store locations across the Southeast, generated meaningfully higher inside sales margins than fuel margins across its entire portfolio. That ratio fuel as volume driver, inside sales as margin engine is the correct way to read any station's financials. There is a fourth layer almost nobody accounts for. The real estate itself. A well-located corner in a growing suburban market appreciates independently of what the business does. The operator who bought at $800,000 in 2010 on a corridor that became a commercial arterial by 2020 is sitting on a $2 million piece of land, whether or not the station ever made money. The business pays the carrying cost. The land does the work. The operating cost structure hits hardest in the places buyers never model. A full-service branded station with a convenience store and a food program runs 8 to 14 employees depending on hours and format. Payroll, including employer side taxes, and any mandated benefits runs $60,000 to $100,000 per month in most U.S. markets. That number has moved up significantly in the past 4 years as minimum wage floors rose in the states where these stations cluster. Utilities, electricity for the coolers, the HVAC, the pump islands. The food equipment run $8,000 to $16,000 per month on a mid-size footprint. A walk-in cooler compressor fails on a Tuesday in July. The repair is $11,000. It is not covered under your standard commercial policy because the failure was mechanical, not a covered event. You write the check, or you lose every cold beverage and every refrigerated item in the store within 18 hours in July heat. Inventory shrink product that leaves the store without being paid for through theft, spoilage, vendor error, employee pilferage runs 1 to 2% of inside sales at a well-managed location. On $1 million in monthly sales, that is $10,000 to $20,000 per month leaving through the cracks quietly, every month, forever. And then there is the mechanism that has quietly ended more branded dealer operations than anything else in this industry. The fuel supply agreement. When you take the brand, Shell, ExxonMobil, Chevron, You sign a supply agreement that locks you to that supplier's wholesale rack price for the term of the contract. You cannot shop a better price. You cannot switch suppliers. You post your street price based on what the market will bear in your area, but your cost is whatever the rack says that morning. When crude oil moves, the rack moves within hours. Your street price cannot follow at the same speed without losing volume to the unbranded station 2 blocks away that is not locked to the same rack. In the spring of 2022, crude oil spiked following the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Rack prices in major U.S. markets moved 8 to 14 cents per gallon within 72 hours. Street prices lagged. Branded dealers across the Southeast and Midwest watched their fuel margins compress to zero and then go negative for 3 to 6 weeks as the market adjusted. The brand collected its margin on the wholesale side the entire time. The dealer absorbed every cent of the compression. This is not a one-time event. This is the mechanism. It runs every time crude moves sharply. The brand designed this structure. The dealer signed it because the brand recognition drives the volume that makes the inside sales work. That dependency is the load-bearing trap in this entire business. Pantry Incorporated built its operation on exactly the model this script has been describing: fuel volume driving foot traffic, inside sales carrying the margin, a Southeast U.S. footprint that reached over 1,500 locations by the mid-2000s. For a time, it worked precisely as the model predicts it should. Then the mid-2000s acquisition run added debt. Not catastrophic debt by the standards of the deals being written at the time, but enough that the margin equation had to perform within a narrow band to service it. In 2008, crude oil hit $147 a barrel in July before collapsing. Rack prices swung violently. Consumer discretionary spending tightened. Inside sales at convenience stores softened across the industry. Pantry's debt load did not soften with it. The company spent the next 4 years managing the gap between what the business generated and what the debt required. It sold locations. It renegotiated agreements. It cut. None of it was enough to change the fundamental equation. The margin structure of the convenience store fuel model is too thin to carry significant acquisition debt through a sustained period of fuel price volatility and consumer pullback simultaneously. In January of 2012, Pantry Inc. filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. The company had revenue. It had volume. It had brand recognition across a region where it had operated for decades. None of that was the number that mattered. The number that mattered was the spread between its operating margin and its debt service, and that spread had closed. Now look at what Wawa did with the same model in the same era. Wawa started as a dairy operation in Chester County, Pennsylvania, converted its first convenience store in 1964, and spent the following decades making a decision that most fuel retailers never made. It treated food as its primary product and fuel as its entry door. Wawa's hoagie program, its coffee program, its made-to-order food operation, these were not add-ons. They were the thesis. Fuel brought the customer to the parking lot. The food program brought the customer back the next day without needing the fuel purchase at all. Wawa is privately held and does not publish full financials, but industry analysts who have studied its format economics consistently note that its prepared food margins run materially higher than its fuel margins, and that its customer return rate is among the highest in the convenience store sector. The company now operates across 7 states and has expanded into Florida and Virginia markets with the same food-first model. Pantry sold fuel and hoped customers would buy something inside. Wawa sold food and used fuel to fill the parking lot. Same asset class, completely different business. Here is the part that most people who study this industry never quite see until someone shows them the ownership layer underneath the operator. Getty Realty Corporation does not sell gasoline. It does not run a convenience store. It does not negotiate a supply agreement with ExxonMobil. It owns the land and the building underneath the station and leases both to the operator under a triple net agreement. Triple net means the tenant, the operator pays property taxes, insurance, and maintenance. Getty collects the rent. In 2023, Getty Realty's dividend yield ran approximately 5.8% paid to shareholders through every crude spike, every margin compression event, every EV transition headline that sent operators into nervous conversations about the next decade. Getty does not care what crude oil does tomorrow. Its rent is not priced in gallons. Getty's portfolio, as of its most recent annual filing, included over 1,000 petroleum and convenience store properties across the United States. The operators on those properties absorbed every volatility event described in this script. Getty absorbed none of them. The vertically integrated chains win the second way. Wawa controls its own fuel supply arrangements. Sheetz does the same. When you are buying at sufficient volume, hundreds of millions of gallons annually, you negotiate directly with the terminal operators and remove the branded supplier's rack pricing structure from the equation entirely. The supply agreement that is the load-bearing trap for a single branded dealer does not exist in the same form for an operator moving that kind of volume. The fragile mechanism dissolves at scale. In a realistic good year on a well-run mid-size branded station with a strong inside sales program, 1.5 million in monthly revenue, 140,000 gallons pumped, a food program generating 25% of inside sales, an owner-operator might clear $180,000 to $230,000 in EBITDA on a $2 million acquisition. That is a 9 to 11% return before debt service. It is not spectacular, it is real, and it is sustainable when nothing breaks. In a realistic bad year, a crude spike that compresses fuel margin for 6 weeks, a cooler failure in summer, a minimum wage increase that adds $8,000 per month to payroll, and a soft inside sales quarter, that same station might generate $60,000 to $90,000 in EBITDA for the year. On a $2 million acquisition with a mortgage, that is not a business. That is a job that is also trying to eat the building. What determines which year you live in is not effort. It is the fuel supply structure, the inside sales program, the labor model, and the environmental baseline of the property you bought. The operators who win knew those 4 things before they signed. The operators who disappear learned them after. The EV question sits at the end of all of this as genuine uncertainty. The Energy Information Administration projects liquid fuel demand softening in the 2030s as EV penetration rises, but the rate depends on charging infrastructure, vehicle pricing, and consumer behavior in ways that remain genuinely unresolved. Anyone who tells you they know exactly how this resolves is telling you more than the data currently supports. What is not uncertain? The operators with the weakest inside sales programs and the highest fuel dependency will feel it first and hardest. A gas station is not a fuel business. It is a retail operation engineered to convert a fuel customer into a convenience customer in 90 seconds or less, and then to bring them back tomorrow without the fuel purchase at all. The pumps are the door. The contract underneath is the trap waiting for the first bad month. You drove past this thing for years and thought it was selling gasoline. It was selling the next 60 seconds of your attention. The pump is the door. The store is the business. The contract is the trap.